So, let's see. So today in the news, a lot of the current events are pretty much saturated. Hey, so I'm talking. What up? Hey, so today what I'm gonna talk about is the saturation that's happening in the news. Basically, what's going on and what has been going on over the past several weeks is the introduction of extremely high tariffs and the trade war going on between the United States and China. And it's kind of confusing for multiple reasons. For one, a lot of people don't understand the way the tariffs work, and even I don't. But to briefly describe what's going on, if the United States imposes a tariff on another country, then the United States has to pay for that tariff that they're imposing on another country. So in order for us to receive products that are coming from somewhere else, we have to pay that percentage that actual tariff. So if the United States imposes a 125% tariff like they did on China, any importers in America are going to have to foot that bill. And they don't want to do that. So what they're going to do is, or what they have been doing, is canceling orders, stopping orders, and flat out saying, no, we're not doing that. We're not going to pay for the shipment now that it's over here. So in the short term, it definitely will cause a lot of supply chain issues with, your steady income or your steady products are coming through on a daily basis, monthly basis, weekly basis, what have you. Now that's changed because nobody wants to pay 125% more on a purchase that they have. And that got me thinking about a lot of things. It got me thinking about specialties, and some people are really good at one thing. They excel at one thing. And over there in China, you have factory workers that have been doing one thing their entire life, manufacturing, whether that's clothes, electronics, multiple things. Their focus has been manufacturing for maybe a couple of generations now, at least 40 or 60 or 40 years, around that. And then I started to go down an even deeper rabbit hole. One of the things that I'm extremely interested in is old architecture. And I would look at buildings that were built in the early 1900s, late 1800s, and I would wonder to myself, why can't we build buildings like that anymore? Why aren't buildings being built the way they used to, using natural stone, using precious woods and stuff like that? I know the wood is a commodity that's not really existing anymore because a lot of the acacia trees and those giant oak trees. Anyway, with the stones, back to the stones, back in the day, there were a lot of people whose specialty trade was stone masonry and brick masonry. There were a lot of people who specialized in certain fields. And along with that specialization, a lot of them started doing it as a child, as a young apprentice. And they would start these apprenticeships extremely early, 6, 7 years old. The kid would start learning about this particular trade. And then I got to wondering even more. I'm like, a little bit after or during child labor, it seems like a lot of industries were booming because you had a huge workforce. You had children and adults both working. And along with that, you had children who, by the time they became adults, were extremely proficient at whatever it was, whether it was metalworking, bricklaying, stone masonry, and things like that. So you had an entire generation of stonemasons that were ready to work because that's all they knew, that's all they did. So you put them to work and building these giant buildings, these giant homes and things like that. And you look at the old Capitol buildings, and they were all made out of granite, they were made out of limestone, they're made out of sandstone. And those are really hard materials to work with, but these individuals were efficient at it, and that's what they did. And on top of that, I know I'm just rambling because I'm just getting my thoughts to what I was saying. I do believe that two things need to happen to make the economy go back to the way it was. When I was younger and I first started working, I remember seeing I live in California, and I remember seeing that the federal minimum wage was $9 or whatever it was. And it said in 2 years, we're going to raise the minimum wage to $12. And I was like, that's cool and all, but it doesn't make a lot of sense to raise the minimum wage, because if you raise the minimum wage arbitrarily, prices on everything else is going to go up. So it doesn't really make sense to raise the minimum wage, just lower the cost of living. You know, it makes more sense that way. So now we got to a point where you got unskilled workers, extremely unskilled workers, people that are first time on the job market, fresh 16, 17, 18-year-olds who have zero skills, but are being paid $22 an hour just based on them entering the working class. And that doesn't work. That makes the price of everything go up. I think that we should abolish minimum wage and make the job market a lot more competitive, and make it more feasible for certain work not to be outsourced. You know, you raise the minimum price over here, of course they're going to outsource the work. It only makes sense. Lower the minimum wage and also lower the cost of living. Now, I'm not sure how that's going to happen, but my idea would be just to start with the minimum wage. Find a way to cut spending like they're doing right now. But lowering minimum wage, I think, would make a big difference, because then you can lower the cost of all these other things. You don't have to lower it a substantial amount, lower it $1. And then hopefully, gradually, things might start dropping in prices. When I was younger, I remember leaving high school, and I would go to the McDonald's up the street, and I would get a McChicken, and I would walk the rest of the way home. McChicken cost $1.08 when I was 17 years old. Now, 17 years later, it's $4. That's almost a 400% increase in 17 years. That doesn't make any sense for the same product. Actually, it's worse quality. So I'm just trying to figure out like how all this works. Over there in China, they have a lot less rule regulation when it comes to labor. Yeah, that's just it. The bottom line is, you know, just manufacturing cost is too high, because you got a lot of people who are demanding money that they don't necessarily deserve just because they're working. No, if you are at a skill level and your job and what you produce is only worth $6, that's what you're going to get paid. You know, there's some people who just aren't able to get into the job market just because they aren't able to. Well, there are people that are unskilled, and these employers like, you know, I don't want to hire you. I'd rather find another way to hire you, or find somebody that's already skilled in this particular area. You know, it's kind of similar to a lot of college graduates that get out of college, and by the time they find the job that they're looking for, they need 5, 6, 7 years of experience to get the job. Like, well, that doesn't work. I'm just rambling. These are just thoughts. They're not really, you know, I don't really have a focus. I just like talking to the camera and just sometimes getting these ideas out there. But yeah, back to what I was saying. With the minimum wage, child labor, and apprenticeships, which I think need to be started back up again, because there's kids like right now. I'm at an elementary school, and I've seen these middle schoolers and these high schoolers. They have zero skills. You know, back in the day, 20 years ago, they used to have shop class, you know, automotive class, plumbing class, electricians class. Maybe not 20 years ago, but more. But they used to have these programs where you can leave high school with a trade. Kids leave high school, don't even know how to read anymore. Kids leave high school, don't know any math skills. Kids leave high school, don't even know how to talk properly. I do feel like apprenticeship programs are the best, because school is not for everybody. Some people love to work, but they're not able to get jobs because they might not have a high school diploma. But they're hard workers. They can get the job done. Give them a few weeks and they'll be proficient at the job. I don't know, I'm just going in. It's Wednesday. This wasn't planned out at all. But yeah, I do believe child labor laws need to change. If you have a 11-year-old that is ready to work, or even a 10-year-old that's ready to work and can prove that they can handle working, let them work. Fuck it. There's worse things happening right now. You got men thinking they're women and women thinking they're men. I work at the elementary school, and they have tampon dispensers in both bathrooms due to a California law that was passed a few years ago. Doesn't make any sense to me, but whatever. That's another video for another time. Anyway, this is my Wednesday videos. I got a little bit better of a setup. I have an actual light behind my camera now. But anyway, I got to get back to work. I'll catch y'all later.